I'm ready.
Everybody ready?
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the December 21st Planning Commission meeting. We will call the meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And let's see. Mark, Commissioner Johnson, you want to start us off?
I will do that. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We were hoping to see the Christmas presents down on the ground there. Okay, Michelle, can we please have roll call?
John Marshall,
Here.
Peter Gower,
Here.
Mark Johnson,
Here.
Arthur Munoz,
Here.
Paula Levis,
Here.
Alex Felto,
Here.
Kathleen Taylor.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item is number 3, public comment. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
I did not receive any public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. We will close public comment and move on to agenda item number 4, public hearings. Item 4.1 is for possible action case number LDC 21-00025 Nevada Cares Campus. A request has been made for a special use permit. Do we have a presentation?
Yes, Arlo is going to present.
Okay.
Share my screen here. Want to start off by thanking all of you for being here tonight for this special meeting. This is, I would say, not a normal application, and we're not in normal times either. Some of you, I don't know if you watched the joint meeting of the Reno Spark City Council and County Commission. There's a little bit of background I wanted to share for those of you who did not participate in that meeting or in all the other discussions about homeless services and sheltering and the really big challenges that the region's been facing in the midst of the COVID pandemic, not unlike other cities around the country. This quote seemed appropriate given the times, especially for our population experiencing homelessness that's really been booming, and for everyone who's been working so hard to try to make the situation better. So I did want to spend a little bit of time on background, not a lot. I'm not going to go through everyone, but really everyone on this list has been working for the last 6 or 8 months to make this application even a possibility. We've been in true crisis mode really since the pandemic broke out. Homelessness just skyrocketed. We have some legal constraints for our enforcement of encampments, and it's just a difficult situation all the way around. So literally hundreds of people have been working to secure a larger shelter site for the region, and this special use permit is essentially the culmination of those efforts. Fundamental to the challenges we've been facing is simple math. There are far more people experiencing homelessness than we have space in our shelters to care for or to shelter. You see this everywhere you go in the community with, little tent cities popping up under freeway and overpasses, along the rivers, in all sorts of locations. It's just been a real challenge. The latest count from October, the Built for Zero by name list, has documented over 1,800 people experiencing homelessness in the region. At the same time, our shelter capacity in total is under 800. And this project really seeks to remedy it, and that's why we're here and why we're here on a short time frame. In addition to the just fundamental lack of capacity in our regional shelters, the operations have been extremely inefficient due to COVID. We've had to establish interim emergency facilities, first at the Reno Event Center, then in the tent structures out on East 4th Street. And finally, we have an opportunity for a permanent facility that's adequately sized. This facility will also address some of the historic barriers to use of shelters. Real problems, unmarried couples don't have good places to go. Pets have been a real barrier where most traditionally shelters don't allow pets, and just the space. Our Community Assistance Center on Record Street is just fundamentally too small for the need. You layer COVID and social distancing on top of it, and it's just been a train wreck of not having shelters for the people in need. In response to this and other issues, both the mayor and the governor have declared states of emergency, which remain in place. Our existing locations, the Community Assistance Center has traditionally been the homeless shelter on Record Street and 4th Street. Just very small site. It's built out, there's no room to grow. The surrounding properties are prohibitively expensive. Additionally, thankfully, Washoe County was able to complete the construction on the Our Place shelters. That's a limited occupancy shelter complex, limited to women and families who meet certain criteria. So that's been great. It's helped relieve some of the pressure, but it's inaccessible to 90% of the homeless population because they don't qualify. And in response, the existing overflow shelter site on East 4th Street was established under the emergency powers, and that will go away once the Nevada Cares campus is occupied, hopefully in early spring. So while the challenges have been daunting, we also have some opportunities. The biggest one is money that we've never had before through the CARES Act. At the joint meeting on November 18th, the 3 local governments each approved cost sharing agreements that in total bring $16.8 million to the budget for homeless sheltering. That's roughly 20% of the total CARES Act allocations that the region received. That's a reflection on how important this issue is and how far-reaching the impacts have been. Other portions of CARES Act funding went to programs like rental assistance, small business assistance, and related programs. There's also broad community support. Homelessness is often an issue where people, will say, gosh, someone needs to do something about this. But the doing something is harder than the saying something needs to be done. I think the crisis has brought forward very clearly to the community that we have to do something, we have to do it soon, and it has to be meaningful. Over half of the complaints that we get to the city these days are somehow related to homeless issues, whether it's parking, encampments, garbage, or just the general safety and well-being of the homeless individuals. We also have our Community Homelessness Advisory Board. That's made up of 2 elected officials from each agency. They've been working tirelessly to try to find solutions, especially over the last year. And they developed a strategic approach to those solutions, which I have in the next slide. And this project's a key piece of it. Kind of the fundamental strategy for addressing homelessness are in these 4 bullet points, and we're making progress on all of the points. The Build for Zero program is one of the more successful approaches for addressing homelessness nationwide. Our region is fully bought into the approach of Build for Zero, and staff from all the agencies, various volunteer organizations, all sorts of people are coming together around the Build for Zero program and the strategy to get shelter for everyone and to help people transition out of homelessness. In addition, we need emergency work, expedited work on shelter capacity. As I mentioned earlier, the sites we have are just fundamentally too small. The surrounding properties are cost prohibitive. We examined all sorts of options with our regional partners, buying old commercial centers, looking at hotels, really just pounding the ground. What are the options out there? But fundamentally, we need a larger site, and we have now secured that. It needs to be at least this 46,000 square feet, which is what the proposal is for. It's really limited the areas. When you look at zoning and the various use restrictions, you start mapping that out, and there really aren't a whole lot of areas where our codes allow homeless shelters. And this site is about as perfect as it gets. And we need to have space to accommodate the couples, the pets, the day use areas, potentially grow this to include a sanctioned campground and all the necessary wraparound services that are really critical to help people find a way out of homelessness. In conjunction with establishing this shelter, the strategy calls for a coordinated and enhanced enforcement of our ordinances for camping, for river protection, and for park use. Under our current situation, we're limited by some legal rulings that essentially say if you don't have sufficient shelter capacity, you cannot enforce camping regulations. And that's the situation we find ourselves in. We can enforce, camping ordinances in a spotty way, but we can't enforce comprehensively under the Ninth Circuit ruling because we don't currently have sufficient shelter space. And then ultimately the goal is to increase the quality of services and the utilization of services. That's really the end goal of Built for Zero, and the shelter plan is one piece of that. So in relation to this site, at the joint meeting on the 18th, the 3 local governments each approved 4 actions. One was a cost share agreement for acquisition and development. That's the $16.8 million that went towards the land and will go towards development of this project. We also all approved a cost share agreement for operations, totaling about $8.2 million for this year, plus about $3 million in in-kind services. For context, that's about double what the budget has been in prior years. There was a 3-party purchase agreement of the Wells Cargo property, which is where the shelter site is proposed. It was a pretty complex property transaction that would not have happened without the partnership of the Reno Housing Authority. In effect, RHA bought half of the site and the regional partners bought the other half for shelter development. The RHA portion, no current plans, but within a few years, plans for transitional and affordable housing will be coming together. And then purchasing of the Governor's Bowl site. So this is for context and scale. We just simply have more acreage to work with now in a pretty ideal location. No one wants a homeless shelter near them, but when you look at the options and what type of nearby uses could be impacted, it's pretty ideal in this location. The plan itself and the site, what we're dealing with here is the southeast corner called the homeless shelter portion. That's subject to this application. The Governor's Bowl Park itself is not being improved with this application, but there are ongoing discussions about what to do with that property for various homeless services. But at this point, we're coming forward with the shelter plans so we can move forward with construction. And then the Reno Housing Authority portion will eventually be transitional housing. The sellers have retained a 1-year lease on that area, so they're going to continue to occupy while the shelter is built and gets established. So this specific application, zooming in a little more, is the 46,000 square foot shelter structure. It's largely going to be a shell with utilities due to budgetary constraints, but it's designed to build out and improve, especially interior improvements over time. We're planning to use the existing older building for secure storage, bicycle parking, storage of belongings, et cetera, that may be rehabbed in the future at some point, but not part of this application. And then there's kind of the restroom, shower, outdoor plaza area, and quite a bit of land for people to be outside, to, hang out without having to be on the sidewalks, on the streets, and close access to the Governor's Bowl Park, which will continue to be available for day use. These sprung structures that we're planning have really kind of become the industry standard for homeless shelters. There's certainly other approaches, but from our research, over half of the cities dealing with significant homeless issues have been using these sprung structures for a variety of reasons. One is cost. They're less than half the cost of a brick and mortar building to construct. We're coming in at about $100 a square foot to build. However, they are safe, they're climate controlled, they have heating and air conditioning, they withstand the weather. You know, it's working out well in Toronto. It can certainly work in our weather here. So these are some examples: California, Hawaii, again, Toronto, of similar structures in use. They're about a 30-year lifespan on these structures. So it's not going to be a 100-year building, but it's far from the temporary tent structures that are being used right now. In effect, we're heating tents is what we're doing today for our homeless population, which is incredibly inefficient. This is a kind of lame drawing, but it gives you a flavor for the shape. If we did this angled building to fit on the site nicely, essentially the back end will parallel the property line along the spaghetti bowl. And we're planning to divide the interior initially into 4 rooms, which will accommodate different users. We have graveyard workers will probably be in one area so they can sleep into the day without being disturbed. We're planning a couples area, a pet area, and then a larger kind of standard occupancy area. I think I have other slides showing on the north end is where we're planning office space, not to be developed now because our budget doesn't permit, but through ongoing improvements. And then these self-contained shower and restroom units are planned. That's really, bathrooms and showers inside are a challenge when people are trying to get rest. So having them conveniently accessible right outside is preferred. They do have interior space within these units, so it really functions just like a restroom in a restaurant. Or anywhere else would. So there's 2 restroom trailers and 2 shower trailers. Interior improvements are largely a blank slate. Different communities have done different things. I think ours are going to be more on the sparse end initially due to budgetary limits, where we'll have the beds, we have lockers planned, and some gathering spaces. The one in Portland here shows a laundromat. That's something that can be added over time. We can't accommodate it in our budget now beyond the service provider just washing linens and clothes and such. But that's an example of a future improvement that would likely occur. Really back to the application in front of you and the nuts and bolts of what we're doing tonight, the regulatory framework. So the states of emergency authorized temporary facilities like what we're doing out on East 4th Street right now and like what was done in the Reno Event Center. The neighbor did challenge that in court and we were essentially allowed to proceed. That suit has been withdrawn. We're here today because we're planning this as a long-term facility and it will not go away when the state of emergency ends. So a special use permit is required by our city code to make this a permanent facility, and that's what we're proposing. The standards for, this is a combined use, it's called public meal provider / homeless service. It has specific and really quite unique design requirements, kind of recognizing the unique nature of this type of facility. They're really in 3 groupings. There's location standards, there's operating standards, and then there's design standards. On the locational piece, again, this site couldn't be much more ideal. It's properly zoned. It's not that far from residential uses, but they're across I-80. It's over a 1-mile travel distance to the nearest residentially zoned property. So you just can't find that kind of separation in the city of Reno. It's located along the bus rapid transit route, the Lincoln Line. That's very important. And it's also walking distance to, I listed a couple other shelter and housing facilities, but really all the support services, transitional housing, the women's shelter, it's all within walking distance or a very short bus ride. So the location is ideal, and it's been years in the making where the CHAB has been pursuing acquisition of property in this area. The operating standards really focus on having uses inside or on the site, which has been a real challenge on Record Street because it's just not large enough. Also coordination between sheltering and meals. And we meet all those requirements, really facilitated by the large site. It's big enough so that queuing on the sidewalk is not necessary. There's the large interior common area. Meals will be packaged, they'll be delivered, there'll be no on-site food preparation or cleaning, but they'll be delivered to the shelter structure, and picnic tables, meals set up on the north end of that structure. And this will be professionally managed with security services by Volunteers of America in coordination with their management of the CAC. The design standards are different. Essentially, it calls for design to be identified through the special use permit process and specifically exempts these types of facilities from Title 18 design standards for a series of reasons. And we've generally addressed code requirements. However, some of those standard code requirements are just incompatible with safescape design and law enforcement concerns. Things like shrubs are not proposed on this site, but we're really focusing on shade trees, on gathering areas, and amenitizing it to the extent that the budget allows. We have sidewalk access from the public sidewalks on 4th Street and at the Governor's Bowl to the building through the site. We're significantly improving the landscaping that's there on the site. And we're continuing fundraising. Essentially, this is providing a framework with additional items to be added as funding comes available. In particular, our latest discussion as of today is it looks like we have some healthcare providers who are interested in helping with development of a coordinated intake center on this site. So the intake centers at the CAC and the Our Place shelter essentially could be consolidated and have one point of contact with the homeless population. So in short, this does conform with code. It meets the findings. We're very excited to be able to move forward with this. We do apologize, this necessitated a special meeting, but really it's a true emergency to get this established as quickly as possible so people have shelter over their head as soon as possible. So we've got construction moving as quickly as we can. We're actually gonna start on grading and site work here any day now. Once we're completed, we're hoping for the end of February, but given the uncertainties with weather and COVID, we're planning early March. All of the facilities, the temporary facilities on 4th Street will be removed. Those uses will be discontinued. And everything will be consolidated in the new shelter building. Future uses on the Governor's Bowl and on Reno Housing Authority property are to be determined. They're not part of this application. Nothing's really decided yet. There's a lot of discussions which will continue. And really the long-term plan, which I know a lot of people are interested in, is to consolidate all of our homeless service operations at this site, the Nevada Cares campus, and at the Our Place facility for women and families. So that over time will mean decommissioning of the CAC and working with the service providers to relocate their operations to this site. And really most importantly, continue the work coordinated through Built for Zero to help provide services and find shelter for the most vulnerable among us. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time and again for being here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Arlo. I don't think we have any other presentations. Is that accurate?
We do. Jeff Borkhart has a presentation.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you get a 2-for-1 tonight. So I'll try to speed it up because Arlo did a fantastic job covering everything. Hope you guys can see my screen all right. As Arlo mentioned, this is a bit of an emergency situation. The point in time count yield in January 2020 yielded 973 people. And in just 10 months, there was an increase of 875 individuals, almost double the amount in that period of time. And there's definitely a need for 1,051 beds is what we're short right now. So this opportunity is a bit of a lightning in a bottle scenario. NDOT's doing the freeway expansion for the Spaghetti Bowl and was able to provide land to the city. All three agencies have been cooperating, and there's been an interlocal agreement, as Arlo mentioned. And the city has access to CARES Act funding that was not available. On top of all that, this is one of the few spots where zoning actually allows this facility, or this type of facility, with a special use permit. And so just to give you a little bit more context of its location, it's right on the southwest side of the Spaghetti Bowl. As Ola mentioned, there are distance separation requirements in code from K through 12 schools and residential. The two schools are about 1,500 feet away, so they meet that 600-foot separation. The nearest residential zoning designation is over 600 feet. On top of all of that, Arlo mentioned that it's a 1 mile travel distance to it because there is the physical barrier of I-80. In addition to that, there are a number of different similar types of uses, whether it's extremely affordable or transitional housing in the area. That's the Hope Springs Tiny Home Project, the Sage Street Dorms, and then the Northern Nevada Mental Health campus right here. So this gives a little bit more context of where it's at on the site. The site size is 16.5 acres. The subject area in the red is only 4.6. This is an infill site. All utilities necessary to support it are available. In summary, this is a 45,000 square foot sprung structure. There's up to 700 beds that could be located inside. The modular buildings located on the site are for restrooms and showers. As Arlo mentioned, code says that we're exempt from Title 18 requirements, but the project is actually proposing new landscaping, new sidewalk connectivity, a new shade structure, new striped parking spaces, and new lighting, all of which will help beautify the site more so than what it is now and create a safe condition for the patrons of the site. And this, you mentioned, Arlo already showed this one. So in general, the operations are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, similar to any other type of residential. It's operating in conjunction with the Community Assistance Center, and the Volunteers of America will be managing it, and they'll be located on site at all times, various different levels of staff. Meals are provided by Catholic Charities and will be prepackaged, and the eating will occur inside of the shelter area, and queuing is anticipated to occur inside the shelter. And since the site's so large, we do not anticipate any queuing to back up into the right-of-way along 4th Street. Security will be provided on site. A security management plan is required prior to beginning operations on the site. That's going to be developed in conjunction with our police department. So given the fact that this is close to the BRT Lincoln Line route, we do not anticipate heavy amounts of traffic. Most of these folks will be using public transportation or walking to the site. In addition to that, many of the services that they will use on a regular basis are within walking distance to the site. So staff can make all the findings. We have had one letter in support of the project. I have not received any letters in opposition. The proposal is in conformance with numerous master plan policies. And as I've mentioned, this is a clear and urgent need for our unsheltered community. And so we're recommending approval with all of the subject conditions.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Okay, now I think we're done with presentations. Let's bring it back to the Commission for disclosures. Let's see here. Oh, there you guys all. Commissioner Velto.
Visited the site, received an email with a letter, and believe that's all.
Commissioner Johnson.
Familiar with the site and received and read the email and spoke with city staff.
Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Familiar with the site and received and read the email.
Commissioner Marshall.
Same disclosures for me.
Commissioner Munoz.
Same disclosures.
And Commissioner Olivas.
Same disclosure.
Commissioner Taylor, same disclosures. Michelle, do we have any public comment for this item?
We did receive one email in favor of this project, and that was the only public comment that I received.
Okay, do we have any other public comment?
No, we don't.
Okay, we will close public comment, bring it back to the commission for questions of Jeff or Arlo. Who would like to start? Commissioner Munoz.
I'll start. Commissioner Munoz for the record. Arlo, I believe this question is going to be for you. What exactly is the plan for 4th Street on down the road when the whole pandemic is over with? I know I've had numerous bad experiences walking down there after Aces games, things like that. And this is one of the reasons I really applaud this project, is to kind of move some of those issues away from that downtown area where I take my family regularly. So just kind of wondering if you can go in depth a little more of what the plan is for that 4th Street after this is said and done.
Yeah, it's probably the answer is not just applicable to 4th Street, but many other areas. It's been a real challenge, kind of the impacts of homelessness of folks everywhere, and it's not a very good environment for families. It can be a little scary, those types of things. So the idea here is to have a site that's large enough so all the homeless services can be consolidated there, and we can really move forward with revitalization and redevelopment of the 4th Street corridor, but also the downtown riverfront and many other areas that have been impacted by encampments. So really it's continued implementation of current plans, which call for urban scale, kind of mid-rise redevelopment. It's kind of an emerging brewery and entertainment district. Plans are to continue that evolution and really just revitalize an older urban corridor. We're also working with many parties on additional pedestrian improvements and safety measures out there on 4th Street, recognizing increased pedestrian use. So I think you'll see more pedestrian crossings with flashers, working with RTC to hopefully get a new BRT station on the Tumwa property in front of this site. But really, this is just a prerequisite to deal with the influx of folks who have no place to stay and end up basically living on the streets.
Thank you. One last question. I've heard from a few people in the public, or a few people I talked to about this, the whole "if you build it, they will come" kind of motto. And people are really afraid that if we do make a bigger area, it's not just going to help our local population, but it's actually going to bring a lot more for where, smaller towns, Susanville, Truckee, places like that don't have anything. And their fear is that this is going to bring a lot more people and overwhelm the system, that even though we're, trying to make a difference now, it's not going to make a difference, because that overwhelming fluctuation or influx of people is really going to damage or hurt what we're trying to do here. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing topic of discussion. My basic thoughts are they're already here and we haven't built it. So, our 1,800 people without shelter, that's fundamental. So I would argue they're here. But secondly, these are not luxurious digs. I mean, this is pretty basic sheltering where you get 100 square feet within a large fabric type structure. So it's safe. and it's warm enough, no one's freezing to death. But this is not a desirable or attractive place for people to live. We want to keep transitioning them out. But it's a fundamental question that cities around the country are grappling with. You know, if you provide services, is that a magnet? If you don't provide services, is that humane? There's no great answer to any of this, but this is our best shot at improving the situation.
Thank you, Arlo. I appreciate what everybody's been doing, and I know this is a big project and a lot of people have been coming together, so I do appreciate your efforts.
Other commissioners, questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Belton.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to start by echoing Commissioner Munoz's sentiments at the end. Thank you, Arlo, Jeff, and Angela, all you who worked on this, because this is a very important project. And I like that it's taking into account the issues that people who are homeless are facing, but I want to kind of ask how those are being accounted for. So two of the things, one of the issues you identified was pets. How is this shelter going to accommodate pets? Because I know that's a huge deterrent to people going to a shelter and seeking out help.
Yeah, probably, honestly, it's probably the first step. We are planning a section of the building to be open for pets, and we're buying some dog kennels as part of that. I personally am not convinced that that will 100% address the barrier, because I think a lot of the folks with or without pets are fundamentally averse to staying in a shelter and would rather camp. So I think it's a step in the right direction. They're allowed, we're encouraging it, we're designing around it. But I don't want to give the impression that, hey, we've got the issue solved, because I don't think we do, but it's a step in the right direction.
Totally, that makes sense. And I get you can't force people to participate or to come to a shelter, but I like that there'll be an option available. The other concern, and this might be self-solving by the time this is eventually built, but what is the, will there be a portion, I guess, for people that may have COVID symptoms or be COVID positive? Will they be turned away if they show up at the shelter?
We have an existing system which we're continuing through the Regional Operations Center, where we have a contract through WellCare that if any individuals who don't have shelter or need a shelter need to quarantine for COVID or get tested positive, essentially they can stay at different facilities around the community temporarily while they're recovering and no longer transmitting the disease. So they will, yeah, any positives, no one will be allowed in, but they will have shelters to go to that are safe and separated from other people.
Okay.
And we've experienced that at the CAC. There have been a number of positives over the last 8 or 10 months, and it's worked relatively well. We've been able to stop any widespread outbreak and keep the positives fairly isolated.
That's good to hear. As far as the funding goes from the CARES Act, are there limitations on the use of that funding that make this project particularly attractive, or the way it's designed work?
There are all sorts of limitations. We could go on for hours about them, but this qualifies. One of the, homeless services and mitigating the impacts of COVID on the homeless population is specifically called out and encouraged as a good use for those funds. So this fits very cleanly. However, there are timing limitations. In all irony, apparently they're going to extend our deadline to spend this when we have 5 days left and everything's already been spent. But it was set to expire at the end of this year, which was part of the rush we've all been doing to get this on. And also some additional limitations in terms of, I guess one of the fundamental ones is the use of CARES money has to be directly tied to the impacts of COVID. So for example, we couldn't use CARES money to shut the CAC and move that population over here. that has to be funded through separate funding sources at some point in the future. So this is really a funding source and a project directly tied to the impacts of COVID.
Great. And the last thing, I guess, is, and this may be more of a comment, but I appreciate you bringing up that the city can't enforce the camping ordinances if it doesn't have sufficient space. I think that's the Martin v. Boise case. We were litigating against Laguna Beach for an anti-camping ordinance at the same time that case was going through. And I know how much of an issue that is for cities. So I think this is a great project because whether you look at it like you want to decrease camps or however you want to approach it, that really does hamstring the city's enforcement. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Other commissioners?
Madam Chair, if there's no more discussion, I'd be happy to or no more questions, I'd be happy to either make a motion.
Do we want to have some discussion real quick?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I do have a couple of questions. Sorry, I was holding off for a moment. Arlo, just a couple of points of, I guess, clarification in terms of how we're looking at this. You indicate, so as I understand it right now, this is one parcel that the city has entered into an agreement, a three-way agreement to purchase. And so we're looking at, as a part of this special use permit, just the eastern half of the parcel?
Correct. And that property acquisition has closed, so we're now the proud owners of the property.
Congratulations. Is there, so I guess I'm a little concerned and just want to know why I'm not seeing anything. If we're only looking at the development of a portion of this, if there's a fence going up as a part of this, should there be a discussion about this being two different parcels? I guess I'm not understanding how we can approve on the whole parcel if there's still a whole nother activity that's going to either occur now or occurring in the future.
There's a boundary line adjustment in process to reconcile the parcel lines with the site area depicted in the application. So that should be recorded here, I think, pretty soon. So Reno will own just this 4.6 acre shelter parcel, and Reno Housing will own the separate housing parcel, and there'll be two separate legally existing parcels. Okay. Reno does pretty regularly approve site boundaries that don't reconcile with existing parcel boundaries. So there's no regulatory restriction against approving a project on a portion of the site or a portion of a parcel like is proposed now.
Okay. Also, Commissioner Johnson, to your point too, condition number 1 does limit to the information that was presented as part of the package. Therefore, that area has been delineated. So they can't just expand out. There is a small sliver of the other portion, which is why or the other parcel to the north, which is why we included it. But the boundary line adjustment will adjust those parcels so that the property matches the covered area.
Okay.
And maybe to more fully answer, we would be applying for additional uses, but we don't know what they are yet. Okay. Those discussions are ongoing, both of what to do at the Governor's Bowl property. For example, there are significant discussions of sanctioned camping, but that's a larger discussion and nothing's ready to move forward. Similarly, RHA will be coming forward with plans for housing, but they don't have anything prepared now. And due to the emergency we're facing, we felt the need to process this immediately while that other work is ongoing.
And I appreciate that. I guess I just wanted to make sure that, and it sounds like it is, that, you know, obviously this is a campus, you've presented this as a campus, but we're not being asked to approve everything on the campus. This is a dedicated thing. Second question I have, and this is, I guess it's a little bit related to one of the findings, but it's more just a question on the actual development of the site and understanding. Obviously, we have a shelter building, and then we have a separate restroom area. But I'm looking at it, and it appears we're still allowing vehicles to circulate between those two. There's crosswalks delineated, but it's listed as asphalt, and I don't see anything on the site plan that restricts vehicular traffic short of emergency vehicles to the eastern half where the striping is at. And I guess I have a concern that if we're certainly forcing people to go from inside to outside to use the facilities, which is another, point of discussion, but we certainly should not have it set up where there can be, random vehicular traffic that occurs in that drive area.
We're having the same discussions. I think part of what you're seeing is we were rushing like crazy to get a complete application in, and there's been some detail on the site work. We're likely going to be converting more of that asphalt area to DG and kind of a pedestrian plaza type gathering area. The plan is we have circulation covered with the route around the building. So we concur that we shouldn't have through traffic, and we'll either through physical improvements or signage ensure that that's kind of a safe pedestrian area, not a travel route.
And I appreciate that, but I guess what I'm saying, Arlo, is that I would almost want, I'll leave this up for discussion, but from a review of the conditions and approval of the site, I would limit, or as a condition, to prohibit non-emergency vehicles to be allowed basically in the area of pedestrian circulation between the building and the restroom. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I certainly understand why we are where we are, but to me, that's a bit of a challenge there. So
this is kind of a role reversal. As the applicant, we would be amenable to that condition.
Excellent. I was wondering about that. So that was good. Thank you. I don't have to ask the applicant if he likes what staff is proposing. And then just I guess a question operationally. You made a number of comments about sort of the limited development that we can anticipate on the interior of the building right now. And I guess one of the concerns I have, and maybe it's a part of the broader discussion, but we have conditions requiring, security. We have conditions that require this to be staffed for 24 hours, but I'm not understanding if that's occurring within the building, if it's occurring, in the other existing building. And maybe this is a fundamental operational question, but there seems to be some, I guess, questions kind of going back to the whole idea of pedestrians and circulation. I guess there's a staff and a population, and I guess I'm wondering, is that part of a future plan that would be permanent, or is that something that's anticipated to be incorporated within the building, even if it's not delineated by walls?
The management will be actively managed for the entire site, inside and outside, by Volunteers of America, who've been our contract shelter manager for a number of years now. So it'll be in coordination, the same group that does the CAC would manage here. We've had 24/7 armed security out there with the temporary facilities on 4th Street. That's planned to continue. In addition to kind of patrolling the site, the security is also patrolling surrounding areas for issues, whether it's on the Governor's Ballpark or nearby streets, to make sure businesses aren't impacted and people are staying on the campus and where they should be. So I think, at least to that portion of your question, It'll be actively managed for the entire property. And one of the things, for example, the sanctioned camping discussion, that will not be established until and unless a separate management contract is agreed to for that. We don't want to open up camping without management of that use. A lot of bad things can happen. So any homeless facility, this one proposed or any future one, really requires active management by professionals in the field.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure that was incorporated. And then the last question in relation to the email that we all received, which agree was in support of this, but I guess it raised a question about some code issues with the establishment of this facility and the legality of other facilities. Can you maybe explain where we were going with that and how that ties into the overall process that we're looking at for the campus?
Absolutely. There's a long history between downtown stakeholders and homeless shelters, including litigation and prior settlement agreements. So it's a very sensitive issue for a lot of stakeholders. We do not concur with Mr. Pani's interpretation that this renders the CAC non-conforming. We don't read it that way. However, we do concur with the general goal that he articulated of relocating and consolidating all homeless services to this location. So, you know, that's, I guess, my response to that one. That is the long-term plan, to ultimately work with the service providers and the various stakeholders to ultimately probably close the CAC and hopefully relocate some of the meals providers and other service providers to this area.
Okay. I think that answers my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners, questions? Okay, bring it back to the commission for discussion. I don't see any hands for discussion. Commissioner Velto?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. If you entertain.
Absolutely.
In the matter of LDC 21-00005, based on compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to the 5 conditions outlined in the staff report. I'd like to also add an additional condition that what is designated as the asphalt area between the showers and the bathroom will expressly prohibit non-emergency vehicles. Does that satisfy your concerns, Commissioner Johnson?
It does, Commissioner Velto. Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Okay, we have a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have further discussion? I don't see any. Michelle, can you call for a vote, please?
John Marshall,
Aye.
Peter Gower,
Yes.
Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Arthur Munoz,
Yes.
Paul Olivas,
Yes.
Alex Velto,
Yes.
Kathleen Taylor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Arlo, for all of your hard work and all of your partners. And thank you, Jeff, and your team. This is a long process. We know a lot of hard work went into it. So thank you very, very much for everything that you guys have done.
Thank you for your role in it and for being here tonight, and happy holidays, everyone.
Enjoy your gift, Arlo.
Let's gear up for a better 2021.
Congrats, Arlo.
Thank you for that. Okay, commissioners, agenda item number 5. Do we have any updates since last week?
More updates.
Okay, I didn't think so. Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Number 6, staff announcements. Angela?
No updates as of last week. Have a great Christmas and Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2021.
Fantastic. Item number 7, commissioners' suggestions for future agenda items. I don't see any. Michelle, do we have any public comment? Any more public comment?
No, I did not receive any public comment for this item.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I want to ask for adjournment because we have such colorful Christmas people on here, and I feel like we're not getting the full benefit.
Well, I'll gladly prattle on for a couple hours if you like.
Okay, listen, would somebody like I was joking. Somebody want to make a motion for adjournment?
I can make a motion for adjournment.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Happy
Christmas,
holidays.
everybody.
Be safe.
Good night.
Night,
everyone.
Bye.